guys, it's Vicky, and today I'm here with another 5-star prediction wrap up. I've really enjoyed doing these videos because it just gets me excited thinking about what books I have on my TBR that I think are going to be 5 stars and finding out if they are. It's just a fun thing. I enjoy it. So back in, when did I do this? Back in June, I think it was. I did this prediction. I picked 4 books. I have now read all 4 books. And I'm going to let you know whether I thought they were 5 stars. So let's get into it. So the first 5-star prediction that I have for you guys was also an anticipated read for me this summer, and that was Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. This is a novella about a group of friends. I can't remember all of their names, but one night they are joking around, whatever, and they decide to do a seance, and they accidentally summon this ancient Aztec goddess, and it kind of possesses one of the girls, and she starts to act very out of character, and the friends become very concerned about her. And so the story is kind of about that. And the thing is, I went into this really excited because I love possession stories. I don't know why, but they are one of the creepiest horror like subgenres out there for me, because the idea of something taking over your body, you have no control over what it does to you, is just really terrifying to me. So, and this was interesting because the entity isn't like an average demon. It's this Aztec goddess. What was her name? I have to look it up really quick. And her name means goddess of filth, like she's known as the goddess of filth. And her name is, hold on, Tlazolteotl. And so this was a different sort of possession story, because to me, even though some of the stuff that our possessed girl, I believe her name was Lourdes, I can't remember if that was her name, if she was the one that was possessed or not, or if it was maybe it was Fernanda that was the one that was possessed. Anyway, she does some pretty like icky things, but I think a lot of her possession was actually, it wasn't scary. It was more, it almost like empowered her instead of destroying her. Like a lot of possession stories, like slowly that person just starts to like deteriorate, and you're like, they end up having to do an exorcism to basically like save their life. And in this case, it wasn't really like that. And so I liked that it was different than your average possession story. And that whole kind of feminine slant that it had, because it dealt a lot with femininity and sexuality, because all of a sudden Fernanda was just more aware of her body and her sexuality and what she wanted to make her happy and to make her feel good. And I don't think those things are necessarily bad. I don't think those are bad attributes to have to like love yourself, you know? And so I found it to be actually pretty empowering, even though it wasn't necessarily what I was looking for in the story. I ended up liking it. There was this kind of subplot that happened that I didn't love so much. I wasn't so interested in, but otherwise it did have all the things that I like in kind of a coming of age horror. The girls find out a lot about themselves, especially Fernanda, and there were some horror elements, not nearly what I was expecting, but those other kind of themes and messages I felt were also very important and very good. You don't see it a lot in horror, so it was a nice surprise. So overall, I gave this, I didn't quite give it 5 stars. It just didn't give me that wow kind of 5-star feeling, though I did really enjoy it. I believe this was like a 3.5 or a 4 for me. I've been kind of toggling back and forth between 3.5 and 4. I would definitely recommend it if you enjoy horror novellas, if you enjoy possession stories, even though, like I said, it is a little different than your average possession story. Yeah, I enjoyed this. It was good, but it just wasn't quite the 5-star, but would still highly recommend it. My next 5-star prediction is a bit of a booktube darling, a bit of a bookstagram also darling. It seems like everybody that reads this loves this. That book is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. And this one is a sort of fantasy story about a guy named Linus who works in this kind of version of the world, there is a kind of a department within the government that focuses on magical people. And basically trying to keep them in check, control them and whatnot. And his specific job deals with the children, because magical children are often sent in this world to orphanages that are specific to them. And so then he has to go to these orphanages and check in on them, make sure that the children are okay, that they're not being abused, yada yada, and then give like recommendations like, is this place okay? Should it stay open or should it be closed? Are they doing like bad things? Blah, blah, blah. And he's good at his job, but he's never felt super passionate about it either way. To him, it's kind of a job. He's very, kind of has separated it from himself. And he just in general, keeps to himself. He finishes his work, he goes home for the day, he puts on his jammies, he listens to records, hangs out with his cat, and he's happy. And then he gets this assignment to go to this island where there are, now I can't remember if there were 5 or 6 of them. I think it's 6. I want to say there were 6 magical children, and this particular, whatever you want to call him, I can't remember what they call him either, orphanage master. And they want him to go and check in on this place because these particular children are, to them, especially dangerous. And that's why they're on this island. So he goes to this island and he starts to spend time with these kids and with the master of the orphanage, which I cannot remember his name. My gosh, I'm so sorry. What was his name? Arthur Parnassus. There we go. And over time, he's there. I think he's there for like a month or so. He, starts to build relationships with the people there, and it changes his life forever. And that's all I'll say about the plot. And basically, I loved this book. I mean, I loved the characters. The children were so different and unique and had such great personalities and were so fun, especially Lucy. And I won't say anything about Lucy except that he was my favorite. He had me laughing a lot. He was just so cute, but had this way about him, and I can't really say because I don't want to spoil things, but if you've read this book, you know what I mean when I say Lucy had a way about him that you just found it so adorable. And I loved, there is a little bit of a romance in here that I absolutely loved. It happened so naturally and like it took its time building up. It wasn't like insta love or any of that. And so by the end, you just felt so happy and good. And just overall, this book leaves you feeling so uplifted and happy. And it has a lot of themes about acceptance and found family and embracing people's differences, because sometimes it's those differences that make them so great. And I loved this. I have nothing negative to say about this book. I know it was about the time I started reading this, there was a little bit of controversy surrounding this book because somewhere in an interview, TJ Klune said something about he sort of found inspiration, I guess you could say, or was influenced by residential schools that were common in parts of Canada, especially up until the mid-90s. And it was basically Indigenous children were taken there and were not treated well. And he found a little bit of inspiration from those sorts of histories. And some people were upset about that he mentioned getting inspiration from something so tragic, which I can't really speak to. I'm not an Indigenous person. And so if that community feels that way about that, then I mean, obviously they have a right to feel what they feel. So basically, I can't really speak to the controversy except to say that I feel that if certain communities read a book and they feel a certain way, that they should be able to voice those concerns, and that's okay. So I personally, reading this book, I went into it kind of knowing that controversy because, like I said, it kind of came up when I had started reading. And if it had not been mentioned in an interview, I would have never picked up on it. There a connection between what was going on in this book and residential schools. So yeah, I think that, like I said, people were kind of hating on this book a little bit, and I guess if they feel that way, they feel that way. I personally read this book and felt very emotional and uplifted, and it was a beautiful story, and I loved it. So yes, this was a 5-star read, guys. I thought it was gonna be 5 stars, and it was 5 stars. It totally delivered. I loved this. So if you are curious about it, I recommend it. But again, if you are concerned about that interview that TJ Klune did and the feelings of the Indigenous community, take that into account. I would suggest searching for book reviewers that are Indigenous, who might have thoughts about this that they can express where I cannot. But overall, I loved this book and I gave it 5 stars. My next 5-star prediction is a apocalyptic novel called Hollow Kingdom by Kira Jane Buxton. Like I said, this deals with a zombie apocalypse, but it's told through the eyes of a crow named ST, which is short for shit turd. Yes, that is his name. And the whole story is told through his eyes and also the eyes of the other animals around him, because they're sort of seeing this thing unfold where the humans are, something's wrong with the humans and they aren't quite sure what's going on. They're trying to figure it out. And it's kind of about the animals coming through and supporting each other through this time, helping each other out, bonding together where maybe before they didn't. And it's also very, very humorous, I will say. ST's perspective on things just made me chuckle. He was very funny. His best buddy, Dennis, who is a dog, was also quite funny. And there was briefly a cat in here, I believe his name was Genghis Cat, he only probably had 2 chapters, I think, in the whole book, but I absolutely loved him. Like, I was like, okay, Kira Jane Buxton must have a cat because she gets cats. Because just the way his personality was, I was like, yep, that's a cat. That would be a cat. How a cat would react during a zombie apocalypse. Absolutely. So yeah, I really enjoyed this because it was different. It was a unique take on the apocalyptic novel because it's told from an animal's perspective and an animal's understanding of the world. And that's one of the things I found really fascinating about this, and I sort of learned a little bit about animals and such in reading this, is the way that they can communicate together. So ST, like I said, is a crow, and he can communicate with other birds via this, I don't know how to call it, kind of like a communication system that he calls aura. And so it's like they can communicate through long distances, you know, birds and other flying creatures, like kind of back and forth to each other. And so that's kind of how they could like warn each other of dangers and things like that. But then there's also a similar system underground where creatures like moles and stuff can talk to each other, and the trees talk to each other, and the trees can talk to the animals. And then of course there's another one in the oceans, in the water, where those animals and it can communicate. And it was very fascinating to kind of see that, and it made me curious to learn more about how animals communicate to each other like that. It was just really cool. I think though the main issue I had with this was it had a bit of a pacing issue. It started off really strong and then it got kind of slow, and it kind of had a hard time coming back. So other than that though, like I said, it did get slow, and the story was interesting. Nothing crazy. There was an incident at the end that really upset me. But I won't say what it is because it's a huge spoiler, but it upset me. And but overall this was good, and I guess the sequel comes out I think it comes out like next week or something like that. It's called Feral Creatures, I believe, and I'm definitely interested in reading it because I liked this story. I liked the characters. It just didn't quite grab me like I was hoping it would. So this was a 4-star read, but I still highly recommend it. It just wasn't quite that 5-star. But I think if you like apocalyptic books and want kind of a unique take on it, you would like this. And then my last 5-star prediction that I'm going to talk about in this video is the final revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton. And this is a oral history style narrative, so like Daisy Jones and the Six, where you meet these two rock stars, punk stars, Opal Jewel and Nev, what was his last name? Oh my gosh, Nev Charles, there we go. And you kind of learn about how they came to be a rock duo, because they were very kind of on opposite ends of things. Opal Jewel was this young, vibrant black woman from Detroit, and Nev Charles was this red-haired Englishman. And they kind of came together and were this like punk rock duo briefly in the 70s. And then something kind of happened that kind of changed their trajectory and kind of maybe affected their careers. And now in the present day, they are being interviewed by a reporter who is writing a book about their history. And she has kind of a personal connection to them and to their story, but I won't say it, even though I don't think it's too spoilery. You learn about it pretty early in the book, but I won't say it here just in case. So she has like a personal interest in their story, and she's writing a book about them, and they are getting ready to kind of reunite after like 40 years to play together. And so they're kind of trying to hash out things that happened in the past and all of that. And overall, this was a very entertaining read. I listened to the audiobook and it was a full cast. Fantastic. Highly recommend listening to this on audio, because it's like listening to an episode of Behind the Music. So good. It was so good. And I really liked that this one kind of played, if I'm comparing it to Daisy Jones and the Six, which I can't help but do because they are similar, right? The way that this one is different though is that this one seemed to focus more on the kind of celebrity and sort of spectacle of it all, of being a rock star, where I feel like Daisy Jones and the Six was a little more, to me, I was a little more connected to like the music, the actual process of creating music together. This one, it was more about outside forces that were going on, that were like in society, that were affecting this duo. And so it was different because, like I said, both books made me feel like, wow, that I felt like this was a real rock duo. Like I felt like, where can I get this album that they made? But it wasn't quite the same as Daisy Jones and the Six in terms of the creation of the music, which was a huge part of what I loved about that story and what I love about stories like this. This, like I said, focused more on the outside factors that affected their band, specifically because you have this duo in the early 70s where one person is a young black woman and a young white man, and how that was just very different at that time. So the big issue I had with this one, kind of like Hollow Kingdom, was the pacing, because in the beginning you're told about this event. There was this showcase going on that the record company put on where Opal and Nev were going to perform, and you are told that something happens at this showcase that just kind of rocks the rock world and changes things. And so I was thinking going into this book, like, you're leading up to that moment, that showcase, and that's the climax. Well, that happens in the middle of the book. So for the last half of the book, I was like, what else are we gonna do here? Like, what are we gonna talk about here? And so it was a little bit, I don't know, it was a little bit slow after that. But I think it was because the slowness, I think, happened because it started to focus more on the reporter. Because like I said, she has a personal connection to this whole story. And when it shifted to like that kind of focus, I don't know, I wasn't as interested. And so I guess with this book, I liked how it focused on, like I said, the kind of spectacle of being a rock star and all of that, being in the limelight, and the kind of behind the scenes story of how they came to be. But I wasn't real connected with like I said, the making of music and stuff. Just wasn't quite there. I did enjoy the characters. I thought Opal was a great character. And then she had a friend named, oh my gosh, what was his name? I'm totally blanking. Okay, I looked up his name. It's Virgil LaFleur. He was a great character as well. I really liked him. But it just didn't quite like wow me like I wanted. Very, like I said, very good story with a lot of social commentary. So yeah, it was interesting. I enjoyed it, but I didn't like love it. I wasn't like living for it. So I would recommend it though. Like I said, totally get the audiobook if you can, because it was so good, so good. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. All right guys, so those are the 4 books that I had predicted would be 5 stars. And if you're keeping track, just one made that 5-star for me this time around. But I'm not complaining because the last round had none. So sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. But overall, these all were enjoyable reads. I would recommend all of them to you guys if you haven't read them. They are all good. Some of them just didn't quite give me that 5-star feeling, and that's okay. So yeah, let me know down below if you've read any of these, what you rated them. Because I would love to know. And yeah, hopefully I will be back soon with another round of 5-star predictions. I'm so excited to go through and kind of figure out which ones I'm gonna predict to be 5 stars. So yeah, I will be back with that hopefully soon. And that's it. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.